Hi, welcome. On this video, I want to respond by way of Robert Cabral, pictured here. The same Robert Cabral who a while back had made that highly contradictory statement regarding science has no place in dog training. I encourage you to watch the videos on my YouTube channel where I responded to that statement based on the fact that balanced dog trainers are in agreement with this idea that training is a learning-based exercise once a relationship problem is already underway between a dog and owner. Again, I talk about the issue by way of how a counterfeit picture is set in motion by many who jump into a relationship problem and right from the very beginning, when a relationship problem is already underway, when the perception of dogs need to be changed the right way. Trainers who motivate dogs to respond while assuming that those responses can be trusted by way of perceptions of dogs changing and behavioral issues diminishing, which again I show is inherently flawed in the criteria that these trainers are using to even establish that perception dogs are in fact changing the way that they assume they are within the framework of response. It's not based on criteria that I talk about, influence and control to reveal. Okay, I talk about, even certain moments in the relationship. And again, I line this all up. And again, I talk about the parenting example. You can frame this up even through the parenting example. But then when you just look at how many dogs and owners encounter a counterfeit picture by way of this superficial idea as to what training is, dog owners that invest time, money, and energy into using treats, getting a dog to do a great sit, a great down, a great come, a great stay, and how dogs can look fantastic, 5 minutes in to a relationship problem as they're moving around the training environment, only to discover once you go back into the real world, once you go back home, that in fact you're still dealing with a relationship problem. I understand that just how common that is. This happens all the time. This is the number one issue in the dog training world. And you have these trainers out there, those who identify as balanced, those who identify as force-free, your play-based trainers, other trainers who are in agreement with this idea that trains a learning-based exercise, and again follow this idea that holds to this whole thing about just at an appearance-based, response-based level, without considering what, even in terms of connecting dots, in terms that you're dealing with a relationship problem. I mean, it doesn't even make sense how these trainers are even engaging a relationship problem because they don't even consider the problems that are inherent to motivating dogs that way. And again, the question is, well, as dogs are doing a great sit down, come and stay, like, what does that even represent? Do you truly believe, or should you believe that that's just what a process is? And the way you want to look at this is no different than, again, that's why I keep talking about the parenting example. You're dealing with a selfish child. Child's become very selfish. It's no different than, sure, you can get them to perform certain like good responses, such as, say cleaning up their room for something that they want. Okay, maybe the brand new Xbox game. The question you have to ask yourself is based again on just that superficial level of engagement. Is that truly all that it's about? Can you trust the responses just at that level that way? Considering in terms of the relationship itself, your role, the parenting style that's in play, parental influence, okay, how that is part of the equation, right? And other determining factors to actually properly assess that the relationship's actually getting better. Like, how do you see? These are the things that the dog training world and those who identify by way of this idea of things, they don't consider. And it's gotten so bad that the culture has gotten to a level now where it's like built in. It's like part of the package deal that when dog owners are encountering a counterfeit picture within the framework of response, and how this is being packaged up is that failure is just part of it. It's just like it's part of the package deal. It's become normalized to blame dogs as the problem when the relationship doesn't actually get any better. So I talk about this, understand. So I encourage you to check out my YouTube channel where I get into all of this. And I go through all these controversies, part of my Flipping the Script series. And I show that these are not some random things happen. These aren't just accidents or coincidences, that these are all point towards what I'm saying in terms of this very popular idea, how these trainers are jumping into a relationship problem the way they're doing it. Meanwhile, dog owners are getting their certificate. Things can look fantastic as dogs are moving around for motivating agents, only to discover that, going back into the real world, that the relationship hasn't got any better. And then, guess what? All the excuses that happen in terms of the blame shifting on the dogs, this is all inherent to this idea of things. So here, getting back into, again, I'm kind of going back into refocusing here on what's happened in the dog training world. I always, it's part of my norm. That's what I'm calling it now, is I step back from this stuff because I understand that this is such a divisive thing happening in the dog training world. I continue to help dogs and owners the right way all the time. And what you're seeing in the dog training world isn't normal. Okay, this is not a normal thing. And meanwhile, you have these balanced dog trainers out there who are pretending to actually have answers, and they don't, because they don't follow the path of approaching a relationship problem as a intervention. Okay, they built off of this idea that training's a learning-based exercise. That's why the statement that Robert Cabral made a while back is so contradictory, to say science has no place, when balanced dog trainers, they've built off of this flawed idea of things. And they're in a trap, they're in a catch-22 situation. They can't get out of it. You understand that this is part of all the confusion, okay? And they're compromised. There's no way out. And so, meanwhile, this is why you're seeing things getting worse and worse and worse. So here, again, my goal is to inform and educate people, and the people I'm focused in on are the dog owners. That find these videos or the information. I would really encourage you to think about what I'm saying, because understand something here. When you end up with a bad picture, when you end up with your certificate, and and things aren't getting any better with your dog, understand that that's no accident. Okay, that's not your dog's fault. This is part of the kind of the rig game that has been going on for many, many years with these trainers, and they're not going to stop. Okay, this is the other thing, because they're not incentivized to do so. Okay, they're making money off of it. So this whole, how everything's all set up, it's gotten out of control, and so there's nothing to pull these individuals back to, even for them, they've gotten to a level now where they don't even care to even do the right thing and stop. Everything should halt, and if you really care about dogs the right way, and this isn't happening. So I want to play this video because, again, this is one of the things where you see some of these individuals on social media, very popular, but I want to, again, put forward my voice here so people can, fill in some gaps here, connect some dots as to what's happened. So, so this is a conversation between Robert Cabral, identified as a balanced dog trainer, and the president of the International Association of Canine Professionals. And again, you see a lot, again, more controversy. You see Zach George all over social media trying to slam these associations for, continuing to promote, as he defines it, adversive tools. I talk about that, how everything is set, in terms of how everything aligns, okay? Understand that when your foundation, okay, isn't based on following the path of a process which follows the path of an intervention. And I talk about those two core ingredients, influence and control, how they're, aligned, how they're reconciled through a process that follows the path of an intervention, but a intentional interaction-based method. And so one of the things you see, and this is a constant theme throughout, is many of these, balanced dog trainers who get equally triggered when they see certain reactions, okay, you go back to the Jeff Gellman, I bring that up, Jeff Gellman, bonker situation. You look at just what happened there. You go do your research. How many of these balanced dog trainers just piled onto that situation? And this isn't in defense of Gellman that way, because I talk about that situation represents what I'm talking about, confusion. Okay, it wasn't abuse. It was the dog had a startled reaction. But that's the thing about a reaction. Okay, so even the ability to be able to reconcile reactions of dogs properly through a method that aligns properly, not Gellman's method, but a method that aligns properly. Balanced dog trainers have the same problem and the same triggered reaction for a reason. Okay, because it lacks depth. They're focused on, again, the superficial idea of things, lacks depth. And so when, again, you talk about being able to work through a relationship problem, you get the same problem here, because balanced dog trainers, they're in agreement with the same idea of things. So this matters, okay, in terms of, I talk about coming out on the other side of a process by way of a predictable outcome. Okay, that's problematic for balanced dog trainers, equally so, just like force-free trainers. So I understand this is a massive problem, but again, I'm going to play some of this podcast. You see a lot of these podcasts, social media. You see these balanced dog trainers all jumping on these podcasts. But one thing you're not going to hear, you're not going to gain clarity as to, you won't hear any other trainer out there talking about the real issue. You're not, because they're all sold out to this idea thing. So even when they get these force-free trainers on their podcasts, they're still within their ideological comfort zone. Understand these force-free and balanced dog trainers, they're in agreement with this idea. The only thing they disagree on is the role of tools, the role of corrections, right? But you see what's happening is these balanced dog trainers are taking heat from the force-free side of things, but they can't respond to it because they're in a trap. And again, I encourage you to watch the video I have out on my YouTube channel, a balanced dog trainer, Jamie Penrith, going on Good Morning Britain. And you'll see that moment. You'll see that moment that as the interview goes on, where he gets, he's in a trap to respond to, the role of remote callers. And, you talk about, you hear this thing about changing the focus of a dog choice. This gets into the specifics of, I talk about the role of, influence in terms of intercepting an expressed state of mind by way of dog. Balanced dog trainers, they're confused. They're mixed up in that. This is why they cannot answer the questions, and they get put in that position where they're losing tools because they're in agreement with this idea of things. So they get into specifics of the role of influence, control. That's something they're jockeying around trying to come up with something, but they're basically at the mercy of this ideology, because when I come out and say, hey, training is not a learning-based exercise, that is a problem for balanced dog trainers. They get equally offended at that statement, at that pushback, because that's the point. The point is they're saying, this is why you hear the statements been going on for years, that there's more than one way to train a dog. And I counter that and say, well, what's that statement even based on? Right? Think about that. Both these groups call themselves dog training experts. Well, how is that even possible? How can these trainers even get away with doing that and marketing themselves that way if both these groups are pretending to be offering something different? There's so much here. If you start unpacking all this stuff, you're going to see it. You're just going to be, shaking your head. So here I'm going to play some of this video. We're going to respond to it. One of the big things here, you see this whole thing about dog trainers unite. But one of the takeaways here is understand that when you talk about uniting, okay, this is where I talk about, this big lie that training is a learning-based exercise. You can't unite around a lie. Okay, understand that this is when you come down to it, you see all the divisiveness even amongst these groups themselves, and all this everything that's happening, all these controversies. This is the result of it. When you base when you create your foundation that's based on a lie, you can't unite around that. Okay. You can't, it's impossible. So this whole thing about, you see these narratives about uniting and coming together, and it's impossible. You can't come together on anything that's not based on the truth. And this certainly is not. So I'm going to play some of this video and respond to it. I'm going to stop along the way. I'm going to do some multi-parts here. And so some of the things I'll be talking about here, and honestly, I have not watched this, okay? This just came out, so I want to respond to it. So I'm going to be doing some multi-parts. So I'm going to stop along the way to respond.
Great show for you guys today. I wanted to have this next guest on for quite some time. He is the president of the International Association of Canine Professionals, which is called the IACP. It's an organization I've been a member of for many years, and I support them wholeheartedly because they are the last bastion left to support real dog training. I've talked about them on many podcasts.
Now again, stop it here. Now, this is one of the things that talk about these, so-called professional dog trainer associations. One thing to keep in mind, I put a video out about this before, very interesting, that if you want to be a member of this group or a balanced, dog trainer association, even if you're a force-free trainer, no problem. I mean, they'll take your money, they'll accept you, no problem at all. But if you want to be a member of, say, the Dog Trainers Guild or a force-free dog trainer association, and you adhere to using certain devices, correcting dogs, forget it. Okay, you're not going to be accepted. If they even get a whiff of the fact that you advocate as a balanced dog trainer, you're done. So just want to make that point of, I talk about these associations. I mean, because understand that they align with this idea that trains and learning-based exercise. They all do. And so this whole thing about, being part of these groups, to credential, right? And it's amazing to me, if you go to any of these meetings or whatever, one thing I guarantee you're not going to hear is any of these trainers, anyone getting up on the stage actually talking about the real problem. Okay, this is amazing to me. This is how dysfunctional this all is. So it's a whole system based on this lie that trains a learning-based exercise. All of it.
I've had other guests on who are like relatively related to them, like they're the service dog people from them. But this is the first time I've got Jason on here. He's the president, and we're going to talk about a lot of stuff. We're going to talk about dog training. We're going to talk about the future of dog training and why it's important we have an organization like the IACP. So let me bring Jason on. And there he is, handsome as ever. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for being on. So let's start out with, because I think people are kind of unsure why we need more organizations, right? Like, why do we need something like the IACP? It's an important point. I want you to address it because people need to know.
There are, in my opinion, everybody sort of has their own, I guess, vision of what the organization is and what the organization does. So I'm going to sort of share my personal vision of what the IACP is. I feel like, as you kind of alluded to previously, the IACP is sort of our last stand in protecting the rights and the abilities of trainers to work with dogs and work with clients to create better lasting relationships with those dogs in any way that they see fit, as long as it's humane and ethical.
Mm-hmm.
So here, just stop here. So again, and this is what you see a lot is superficial language. This, whole thing, and this is where the statement comes from. There's more than one way to train a dog, and just pay attention to the language here when you hear, the way that they see fit, ethics. Talk about ethical, right? And this goes into this whole thing about, and this gets into this thing about the role of influence, control. This goes into certain, tools. Okay, talk about remote collars. The reason why they're being banned. So it's this thing with balanced dog trainers who are trying to have their cake and eat it too. That's really what this is about. They're trying within while being aligned with this idea based on what it represents. Okay, this learning-based idea based on what it represents, and this is where you have to apply critical thinking to understand where I'm coming from here. That it does not reconcile the balanced dog training idea of things. Okay, based again on the role of influence. So I talk about, again, I talk about the theme of being dialed into the relationship, the dog's state of mind as a dog is expressing control. I talk about an express state. Those are the things that you won't hear balanced dog trainers, they don't go there because they're not dialed in that way. And so when you get into this issue about, response, about changing the dog's focus versus using a correction, see, this is the trap they're in. So because they are not dialed in that way, and they cannot explain, right? They cannot back out of this. They cannot explain themselves as to why they're correcting the dog. They're in a trap, and this goes into this whole thing too. With as society becomes more and more, permissive, right? The weight of it's just like as you see the dominoes start to fall, as you see the scale start to tip more and more, the focus of or the way in which force-free trainers are able to gain the high ground is in the fact of what this ideology represents at its core. Okay, it's not based on the balanced dog training idea of things. Based again on approaching training as a learning-based exercise. See, it's not, this learning-based ideas does not look at, when I talk about a relationship problem, it doesn't identify a process that way. Okay, it doesn't subscribe that way to what a process is. And so this is why I keep talking about in my videos, I keep talking about, and bring it over to the parent example, because it parallels almost exactly. It'd be like saying again, as a parent dealing with a selfish child, you're going to turn into a learning-based exercise, a relationship problem that way. You'd be like, okay, well, think about what parenting style does that align with? Permissive, okay? The permissive parenting style. And look at if you do your research, look at the permissive parenting style, the consequences of the parenting style. You'll see the same dynamics, okay, involved. The real issue doesn't get fixed. It creates divisiveness. Okay, it does not, bring the focus on the parental role properly. It's not, it doesn't engage relationship problem properly, and all those things. So I'm going to stop it here for part one. I'm going to be talking through again. I want to play some of this, but again, point here is pay attention to language here. These trainers are like, it's more about freedom to do what you want. In avoiding the specifics of, get it into the whole thing about influence, control, the relationship itself, the express state. You don't hear that from these You won't hear that from these trainers. So their whole thing here is trying to move forward and be allowed to do what they want to do based on what this ideology represents, and you can't sustain it. Okay, you can't do it because you've aligned with the very idea itself that puts you in that trap, because you can't reconcile influence and control that way, the way they want to do it through that ideology itself. It doesn't reconcile. It doesn't align. Period. And this is why you're seeing all the problems you're seeing in the dog training world. So this is part one. I'll be doing part two here. I'm putting that over here too as well.